How many of you want or currently do use blockchain in production or enterprise use cases? Yeah, consensus, yeah, cool. All right. How many of you are looking for a job? Just always, all right, excellent, we got one, good to know. So I'm Daniel. I'm one of the co-founders of PegaSys. My role is mostly around strategy and operations, but I have a somewhat technical background. So this talk will be mostly at a high level, but we'll deep dive into the occasional technical topic. Feel free to interrupt me at any point, ask questions. It's better if this is a conversation rather than just a one-way flow of information. How many of you are familiar with ConsenSys? All right, pretty much everyone. So PegaSys is the protocol engineering group at ConsenSys. We're the one of, if not the largest groups within ConsenSys. So today we're about 60 people. And we're split into three main areas of activity. So we have product, which is what I'll be mostly talking about today. It's called Pantheon. It's an open source Apache 2 licensed mainnet Ethereum client that also has a suite of enterprise features that you can use to customize for enterprise deployments. Then we have a large R&D effort, around 20 people that are working across mainnet and private chain use cases. So on the mainnet side, we're doing Ethereum 2.0 research. We've got about 11 people working just on Ethereum 2.0 and the roadmap to iterate mainnet. And on the private chain side, we're working on a suite of enterprise technologies, not so dissimilar from what the Clearmatics guys are doing, around custom consensus algorithms, privacy approaches, and then ultimately side chains. And it's a pretty massive undertaking, and we often get the question, why are we going through the pain of doing all this? And so we have a vision that enterprises in some point in the future, I'm not going to put a time frame on it, at some point in the future will want to interact on public blockchains. Hey, all right. We have this vision of what we call a convergence of current private chain and consortium technologies and mainnet. And to facilitate that vision, to facilitate those use cases, we need to do two things in parallel. First, we need to lower the barrier for enterprises to adopt blockchain technologies today. That's enterprise Ethereum focus, that's private chains, that's consortium chains, custom consensus algorithms, privacy measures, zero knowledge approaches, permissioning. And then it's also a suite of tools around deployment, ease of use, and so forth. But at the same time, we're really committed to making mainnet more scalable and more stable so that in the future, enterprises can also interact with a mainnet world. And evenings like tonight are always really exciting for me. We work closely with Clearmatics and hopefully even more closely in the future, bouncing around ideas on consensus algorithms. And we spoke with USC last week about their desire to be client agnostic and support a broader ecosystem, which is really exciting. We're working with Aztec as well on deploying their smart contracts on both public Pantheon, which should be doable out of the box, but also on private nodes or private chains as they come up. And so that's a pretty awesome partnership. But the thing that's cool is all these technologies are brand new, right? Autonity was open source last week, is that right? When did you guys go live? November? Yeah, November. So 4 months. Pantheon 1.0 is open source today. I think the most encouraging thing in all of this is just the state of innovation in the ecosystem is accelerating, and that's exactly what you want to see in a thriving and successful ecosystem. So with that spiel behind me, I think today we're the largest Ethereum protocol team. That's maybe just a sign of how much money we're spending on this, but it's also a sign of our commitment and ability to take a multi-threaded approach to building software and focus on a set of problems rather than any one. But I think what differentiates us a bit in mindset is we really are trying to bring, and alongside Clearmatics is doing this as well, but we're trying to bring an enterprise focus to Ethereum software. So we sit on the mainnet core dev calls, and we have people who are very used to meeting deadlines and requirements and trying to move the entire ecosystem into a more mature mode of software development. And it's one of the contributions we're excited to play a small part in making. So we have 18 open positions right now on PegaSys. So we're trying to grow the team pretty dramatically. So I'll mention some of the open positions at the end, but just planting that seed if anyone is interested. Our toughest problem is finding good technical talent. All right, there we go. So as I started mentioning before the slides, we have a few main areas of effort. I'll spend most of today talking about Pantheon, which is the product that was the latest version of which was open source today. But we also have these massive R&D efforts. And the third one, which is less celebrated and maybe less shiny of an object, but equally important, is our standards work. So we're off tomorrow to the EEA face-to-face in Lisbon. I know Clearmatics is coming, JP Morgan's Quorum is coming, Block Apps are coming, as well as a bunch of enterprises. And the goal there is to iterate the Enterprise Ethereum specification so that we can have an interoperable and unified ecosystem. Right? And technology without standards means there's competing implementations that don't work together, and tools like Aztec will break when they try to go cross-client. And we need broader standards to make sure we have a unified ecosystem and therefore can compete efficiently against the other enterprise blockchains out there. And so those are sort of, in my view, some of the unsung heroes of the space, because it's not the most shiny work, but it's equally important. And before I get into Pantheon, people always like to see who's using it. We open sourced the 1.0 today, but we had some early partners using it pretty actively. So we've got one of the top 10 financial service companies in Europe using it on an extranet to do bank settlement and tokenize fiat. We've got Adhara. We've got Alastria, which is over 70 financial institutions in Spain running, testing out and moving into production, hopefully, on that. And we have DrumG, which is a new one I think we're announcing today working on us, which is some of the 10 biggest banks in the world doing OTC market settlement. And they'll be announcing, hopefully, more details on that in the coming months. I'd say 80%, full disclosure, of our use cases are financial services. 20% are healthcare and supply chain. We're really excited by all three verticals. It's sort of the first verticals we really want to cater to. But the early movers have largely been in financial services, and that probably makes sense as well. So before going into details on the specific Pantheon roadmap, I guess, what the heck is Pantheon? So Pantheon, like Autonity, is an Ethereum client. There's a lot of similarities, but I'll just highlight some of the differences to position. So Autonity is a fork of Geth. Pantheon was built from scratch, from the ground up. So that means that we're also compatible with mainnet and private chains. Geth is compatible with mainnet for the Autonity side. One of the other advantages that we believe of being built from the ground up is we've chosen an Apache 2 license, which some enterprises care about, some don't care about. But for those that care about, it's important. GPL or LGPL licenses can be really difficult to go through InfoSec review. Less and less difficult over time, hopefully. I hope they get broadly adopted, but that's something out there. And then, one of the things that we're trying to do is be vendor-supported open source. So for Linux, you had Red Hat. For Hadoop, you have Cloudera. We believe that a truly enterprise-grade software company that can provide production-grade support, training, and onboarding to the technologies will enable broader adoption. So those are just some of the high-level features of our client, or approaches of our client, before going into the details. So here's the roadmap. There's a lot of technical terms and buzzwords on here. But just to sequence this for you all, at DevCon in end of October, early November, we open sourced our mainnet client. The mainnet has been running since then, stable, processing transactions, working in that adverse and hostile threat environment. And then today, we're open sourcing our first set of enterprise features. And when you talk about enterprise features, people typically talk about the 3 Ps of enterprise, right? So that's performance, permissioning, and privacy. I think there's probably a fourth, which is just ease of use. Like, will the thing stand up when we deploy it? Will it crash all the time? And so forth. The release today is focused on the first 2 Ps, so permissioning and performance. So just like Autonity, we have a variant of the IBFT consensus algorithm that changes some of the implementation details from what Ami's built. One of the topics for conversation over the next couple days will be how do we all unite on the same version of IBFT to facilitate interop. But we are really excited by that basis. And as Yusuf said earlier, it enables transaction finality with high throughput while still having some security of rotating validators, which is really attractive for enterprise deployments. So that's one. The second main bit is permissioning. Something that Autonity has that we don't have is the smart contract governing who are the validators. I think that's really awesome. That's a really cool feature. One of the things that we focused on this, this release was 2 types of permissioning. So most permissionings talk about node level permission, who can join the network, right? We really care about that in permission networks. But we have also added in account level whitelisting. And so that's which accounts can transact with the network, which accounts have the permissions to submit smart contracts to the network. And so it starts to give enterprises a little control over the sorts of roles and behaviors that they want to see on their networks. In parallel, behind the scenes, we're constantly working on performance, benchmarking, throughput improvements, and we're really excited by the improvements from the 0.8 to the 1.0 as well. The third P, privacy, is focused really on the April release. So there's a few people in here who are working, open source contributors on our privacy implementation. It'll look quite similar to what JP Morgan's Quorum does in providing point-to-point privacy with a transaction manager. But what's really, the way we designed it is that we can use it as the foundation for a sort of a 1-year roadmap to move those private transactions into sidechains. So I'll speak more on this later if it's interesting, but we've really designed our privacy with a sidechains feature in mind as sort of one of our design principles for the project. You know, the other stuff on here is super important, but I'm going to rush over it really quickly. It's the stuff that you need to get easily deployed in enterprises. It's integrations with existing technologies, databases. It's authentication of JSON RPC calls. It's monitoring tools. It's all the sorts of things you need to really run in a true production environment. But it's not the Ethereum flavored stuff, so we can skip that. Here's a bit more detail on our permissioning. So as I said, the version we have today is JSON RPC based. That's the interface that Ethereum, one of the 2 interfaces Ethereum supports. And you can use the JSON RPC APIs to sort of add permissions, remove permissions, update, and so forth. But that file is stored locally on each node. For the 1.1 release, what we're working on right now, the 1.1 release will come out in April, end of April. We'll have a smart contract-based permissioning for this. So rather than having the whitelist live locally on your node, it'll live in a smart contract and ensure that there's no syncing issues on those lists across nodes. And then we're going to move into further and further detail on permissioning. Allows permissions or dynamic permissions for certain sets of smart contracts, permissions for validation around at certain moments or under certain conditions. These are all being very much driven by ConsenSys solutions and their enterprise requirements from active customers they're developing for. And the long-term goal here is to be able to take those same permissions and integrate them with the identity tools that enterprises are already using. And so that's predominantly LDAP and Active Directory. And again, this is our goal of lowering the barrier for adoption for enterprises, making sure that we bring Ethereum to the systems that they're already comfortable with. So here's what I was saying earlier about the privacy roadmap and the goal for going to a sidechains universe. I'm not the privacy specialist in the room, so Ivilo is in the back, and we've got a couple others. Is everyone here? No. Well, a few of the people working on privacy are here, so correct me when I muck this up. But we're rolling out a Constellation-style privacy approach. It's based on our own private transaction manager called Orion. Orion's very much a replacement and drop-in replacement for Constellation, if you're familiar with Constellation, except it's written in Java. And the couple differences we're making, or the couple changes we're making to Constellation, are designed to prevent the double spend problem in Constellation's privacy implementation. So it's a bit of an edge case potentially, but in Quorum right now, you can set up a private transaction with, let's say, 4 participants, and then you could follow up with a future transaction to only 3 of those participants, and you'll have state inconsistencies from the person who is left off. right? And so that's a real problem for certain use cases. And so what we've done in this implementation is we've added a concept called privacy groups, which is once you send a private transaction or deploy a contract to a private group of parties, you can't actually add or remove people to those. The parties have to stay consistent, and that makes sure that they maintain consistent states. At the beginning, we're hiding those privacy groups. So we'll handle all of it. You won't even interact with it. You won't see them or know that they're there, but they're working behind the scenes to ensure that there's no double spend in private transactions. In the future releases, we're going to expose the APIs for privacy groups and add in features for people to add or remove members of those privacy groups, which are pretty important requirements as well for certain privacy use cases. And then even more in the future, the goal is to take in some of the research we've been doing on sidechains to enable cross-privacy group transactions. And that's really the first major step towards a sidechains world, where you can have privacy groups or private chains sharing state, sharing information, whatever world they want, and then interacting via either the mainnet or directly to each other. One thing I'd really like to say is we don't believe there's one approach to privacy that'll work for everyone. Most people in the enterprise context, when they say privacy, they mean a million different things. And so this is one approach, but we're also looking to integrate as many third-party approaches as possible and really offer a portfolio of approaches. Aztec is one of them that we're excited to be integrating with, and there's a suite of others. But privacy is a really tricky thing, and so I'm excited to see what everyone else comes up with as well. Sorry. So how many of you are familiar with the Ethereum 2.0 roadmap? All right. So one of the other things that I just wanted to highlight very quickly is since we have an 11-person team working on Ethereum 2.0, we're starting to make some headway on some of the concepts that are really crucial to the Ethereum 2.0 deployment. And while there's a roadmap that's quite extensive, but moving quickly for the Ethereum 2.0, we get to pull those features into private deployments whenever we think they're ready. So we're going to take some of the components. First probably will be libp2p, which is a different networking, peer-to-peer networking protocol that has enhancements over devp2p, but we're also looking at eWASM and other of the Ethereum 2.0 technologies to bring them in and support them as early as possible in private chains. So that's that. I would be remiss not to at least mention how we monetize, or at least dwell on that for 1 or 2 moments. So as I said at the top, we're vendor-supported open source. When you look at open source, most open source companies follow a very standard trajectory. So they open source something, they try to build a community around it, then they build professional services on top of that. That's these. And then they move into a third epoch of an enterprise edition where there's certain premium enterprise features they hold back for a license fee. So today we're squarely in that second epoch. Ethereum has the community, and so we're rolling out 3 sets of services. So that's training, that's a partner program and a pilot program for early adopters, people who want to build POCs or even production systems and want onboarding, architecture feedback, and so forth. And then the main one here is enterprise-grade support. So this is L1, L2, L3 support if you go into production based on a Pantheon network. In the future, we're going to, like I said, have an enterprise edition. There's a few things I glossed over pretty quickly, some of our other partnerships. So the 1.1 in April should be available on Kaleido as well, which is a self-serve blockchain management tool that's really awesome for enterprises to spin up. There's a few other partnerships that I can dive into. Here's my email. If you have questions or comments or want to get in touch, feel free. We are hiring, like I said, we have 18 open positions. Our stack is Java, which is different from most of the other Ethereum clients. So if you're a Java person or not opposed to Java at the very least, come talk with me. We're distributed, so we work remotely. So if you have friends that aren't in London, come talk to me. We're also hiring non-technical roles or non-purely technical roles around product marketing, digital marketing, developer evangelists, technical writers. So you can go to pegasys.tech for the full list of open roles. Yeah, that's it. So thank you very much.